Peter Kiefer and Peter Subotnick wrote an excellent article on Substack titled Hollywood's New Rules, which details Hollywood's descent into wokeness and the total destruction it caused. It's a long read, but it's well worth it because it shows how bad things have become. They start with an anecdote about the editor-in-chief of The Hollywood Reporter pitching a story about white screenwriters being refused work as a result of the push for diversity in Hollywood. Instead of the newsroom digging into this, they mocked the idea, and the editor-in-chief backed off the story. Another reporter mentioned pursuing the story, and an editor told this person to drop it because no one was going to risk their career over this. When you can't even report facts because it might end your career, that tells you how bad things have become. The article points out that Hollywood was built in large part by Jewish filmmakers who've been written out of the new woke narrative for a totally not anti-Semitic reason, and that Hollywood has made numerous films and TV shows challenging racial, sex, and sexual biases for most of its history. This doesn't mean that there wasn't a well-documented bias in Hollywood towards women, minorities, or gay people. It only means that some in Hollywood tried to challenge that, and shows like All in the Family, Will and Grace, Star Trek, and yes, even The Cosby Show probably did more to make the country more tolerant than most other efforts. Maybe things weren't progressing fast enough. It is ridiculous that you can count the number of black lead actor Oscar winners on one hand: Sidney Poitier, rest in peace, Denzel Washington, Halle Berry, Jamie Foxx, and Forest Whitaker, but complaining that Oscars so white won't fix that. It just results in people being nominated to fill a quota, instead of being based on the quality of their performance. Things began to shift around 2015, and got worse after Trump's election and the George Floyd murder. Now, the Oscars have a policy requiring films to fit a diversity quota to qualify for nomination, which effectively rules out films featuring mostly white casts, crews, and creators from winning. Then you have production companies like Array, created by Ava DuVernay, that focus on so-called underrepresented groups. No one speaks out about these companies publicly, but privately, creators appear bothered by the companies and how people like DuVernay exploited Floyd's murder to pressure people into using her company. According to the article, many in Hollywood are fed up with the wokeness, but they're too afraid to say or do anything because it may cost them work they probably won't get anyway if they're straight, white, or male. Meanwhile, those blocking them have no fear of being blatantly biased. One showrunner had Subotnick and Kiefer show up to his house to view the rejection emails he received because he was too afraid to send them to the writers lest the wrong people see them. Just take a moment to let that sink in. Criminals running global drug enterprises send emails all the time with explicit details about what they're doing, but some showrunner in Hollywood is too afraid of sending his rejection emails to the wrong person because showing how racist and sexist people were towards him would get him in trouble. And what were some of those things said to him? Well, quote, "This one is a dead end. They are going to limit search to women and BIPOC candidates." And how tied to hiring him are you? There are some internally that don't like the idea of hiring a white guy. I wish I had a better way to frame it. I hate this shit. And studio now telling us this job must go to a female/BIPOC writer. Sorry, it sucks. Yes, racism and sexism definitely suck. And as the showrunner said, this is all going to end in a giant class action lawsuit. It's actually amazing that it's gone on for nearly 7 years and so far no one's been sued. There's enough evidence to prove overt, intentional discrimination, but no one's filing any lawsuits. My guess is that if anyone does, they'll never work in Hollywood again, so no one wants to take the hit to make this stop. The thing is, they can't expect the people doing this to them to stop, because the woke are really enjoying themselves. The article quotes a couple of people bragging about it, and my favorite one is from Roche Jeffrey, a black writer behind Grownish, Santa Inc., and Woke. She said, quote, "I don't care if white people ain't comfortable because black people are uncomfortable all the fucking time. I can't tell you how many times I had to bite my tongue so as to not offend white sensibilities, so I don't give a shit if they nervous. Black carpenters are always so polite." Yeah, what Jeffrey said is a real fucked up thing to say, and for all those white people bothered by it, see what it feels like when it happens to you. Roche is a douche, but she's not wrong. For decades, black people, women, gay people, Asians, Hispanics, basically every group you can imagine had to put up with the exact same shit. They were only cast in certain roles, rarely allowed to write or direct, often not given credit for the work they did, and they had to suck it up and take it or risk being branded a troublemaker or a problem and never getting work again. The thing about disenfranchising people is that eventually some of those people will get power, and if enough of them do, some of them are going to return the favor, and they're going to be really good at it because they learned from the best. That's what we have happening here. They're doing to you what you did to them, and now you see how much it sucks. Now, I can't claim to know how to resolve this situation because with the woke ideologues, as we've seen with the right-wing ideologues, you can't really change their minds. They have to do that themselves, and the only way to do this is to ask them questions they can't answer until they get to the point they say, "I don't know," and then hope that sparks doubt in their mind enough for them to ask questions on their own. However, just like the right surrounds themselves with people in media that supports their biased narratives, the woke do the same thing, right down to making cringy content. Honestly, go and watch any of the God's Not Dead movies and then watch any woke movie and see if you can spot the difference. If they're constantly pumping out this woke nonsense, there's not going to be much of a chance to change their minds, unless they screw themselves over, which they're incidentally doing. The article talks about the show Woke and the epic insanity that went down. Woke was meant to be a satire about woke culture while also commenting on what a black cartoonist's life would be like in white liberal San Francisco. The problem is that the writers couldn't talk about anyone other than white men, and the only ones willing to mock wokeness were the black writers. The showrunner was Aisha Carr, who's black, but because of creative differences, which I'm going to assume means she had a sense of humor, she was fired and replaced by a white man, Xander Lehman, who remained on the show until just before it premiered, where he was fired and replaced by a black dude I'm going to call Token because, as one of the black writers on the show said, he was only brought in for optics. Any black dude would do. And do you know what happened to Token? Yep, fired too, replaced by another white dude for the second season. This is the absolute state of Hollywood, and it's just embarrassing. You can't sustain this. Nothing good is going to come out of a creative system completely bereft of creativity. And you have people defending this, like Kevin Parker, a black talent manager, claiming that this is all about money. Quote, "This whole diversity thing, it's about money. It's good business to tell stories from different perspectives, and that's all this really is." Then why do most of the diverse stories bomb? Sure, there are some wins, some big ones in fact, but most of these are massive losses, and even those with box office success wind up with terrible reactions from the general viewing audience. Disney, Star Wars, Captain Marvel, Black Panther, these are woke movies that all cracked $1 billion, but are either never mentioned or only spoken about negatively. Then you look at things like Star Trek and Doctor Who that have tanked in the ratings and destroyed their existing fan base. When you say it's about money, where are you making it? Because it's not off of these wokeified franchises. No one's buying what you're selling, so this can't be about profit. It's got to be about politics, and at this point, you've got to see how fans are rejecting this nonsense in every medium, from film to games to comics. They're just not buying it. So to keep making it only kills your industry. Speaking of industrialized killing, woke Hollywood didn't just forget about the Jews. Oh, I know it's wrong. But what's more wrong? That I said it, or that you laugh? Back in September 2021, the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures celebrated its opening with a massive gala, featuring numerous movie stars and showing off its 33,000 square foot theater and 2-story restaurant, and exhibitions about the history of the motion picture industry, and just incidentally left out all the early Jewish filmmakers. Quote, "But oddly, it's missing any mention of the small band of mostly Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe, the people without whom there would be no entertainment industry. In today's climate, in which inclusion and diversity are said to be so important, it's an especially ironic omission. The Jews were excluded from almost everywhere. Their success signaled the inclusivity and possibility that only Hollywood could afford them. The rise of the industry's founding fathers should have been an inspiring origin story around which everyone in the community could rally. And yet, they were kept out. No media outlet outside the Jewish newspaper The Ford mentioned this, and when news eventually made it to the museum's higher-ups, they decided to fix it by making a 6-week program on Jews who fled the Nazis to make movies in Hollywood. The article goes on to suggest that the changes in the business model for the industry led in part to this shift to wokeness. Essentially, Hollywood used to make its money on TV reruns and old movies, but streaming services threw this out of whack. So now many working in the industry have taken a hit to their potential income source, making it difficult for them to afford to live in LA. Mike White, the writer and director of The White Lotus, argues that Hollywood has an easier time talking about race than class, and that may be true. It's also true that stripping people of options usually doesn't work out well in the long run. But I don't think this explains the wokeness because most of those people are white. Why would they turn to an ideology that blames them for all the race and class problems, one that also denies white people are even affected by those problems? Something else is going on here, and I think White hits the mark when he says, quote, "That's the essence of what I find disturbing about some of the stuff on the left. Does this have anything to do with making life better for anyone? Or is this just a game? Is this just about making you feel superior?" Yes, and that's what it's always been about. whether it's from the left or the right, whether it's been about changing or upholding the status quo. It's always been about people feeling superior to others. In the case of how it used to be, it was white Anglo-Saxon Protestants keeping out anyone who was different. Now, it's all about the people they disenfranchised getting revenge. None of that makes for good storytelling or good business, and it damn sure doesn't bring people together. But it does allow people to feel better about themselves, even if it's all a lie. Ultimately, all it does is hurt the art of filmmaking, because as one director put it, people will stop trusting Hollywood. Once people realize that everything is made to check a box and has nothing to do with storytelling or entertainment, they will lose interest. Oh, wait, that already happened. I've said this for years and I'll say it again. If you keep politicizing everything, when you decide to tell a story that matters, no one will care. They will write it off as woke garbage at first glance. Look at how much this has ruined them. Anything with so much as a whiff of tolerance for other people sets them off. Nicely done. That said, if there's a question of whether Hollywood can come back from this, the recent billion-dollar Spider-Man movie is proof it can. Give people what they want, good entertainment at the least, great storytelling at best, ditch the politics, and they will flock to theaters, and you'll make billions of dollars. But keep up with the woke propaganda, and you're going to find yourselves wallowing in a diverse sea of mediocrity that nobody wants to watch, including you. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.